So, I want you to imagine a tiny, just really common woodland organism, like something you'd probably step right over on a hike and not even notice.
Right, just totally ignore it.
Yeah, exactly. But what if I told you this little thing can actually control the weather, shoot perfect smoke rings, and, potentially hold the key to treating brain diseases?
I mean, a lot of people see fungi as just like static bumps on a log. They assume that level of activity is, strictly for science fiction.
I certainly did. But for today's deep dive, we're pulling from atmospheric physics, neuropharmacology, and ethnobotany to uncover the hidden science of Lycoperdon perlatum, better known as the common puffball.
Oh, the puffball. It's such a fascinating little
It
fungus.
really is. And believe it or not, its genus name actually translates from Greek to wolf's fart.
Which is, I mean, a very literal, it's slightly immature description of what it does.
Yeah.
But the mechanics behind that puff are just incredible.
Yeah, let's look at that puff for a second because the sources say when a raindrop hits the top of a mature puffball, the whole thing compresses like a bellows, right?
Right, yeah, like a tiny accordion.
And it blasts dry spores out of this little hole at the top at like 1.8 meters per second. When I first read this, I immediately pictured those smoke ring machines you see at science museums.
That is actually the perfect comparison. High-speed cameras reveal it isn't just a messy cloud of dust. The puffball generates a highly organized, rolling donut of air, a literal vortex ring.
But wait, if a falling raindrop triggers this blast, how do the spores not just get, immediately flattened into the mud by that exact same raindrop?
Well, because of the shape of that donut of air,
Yeah.
by rolling back on itself, the vortex creates a localized slipstream.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it allows the spores to completely bypass the boundary layer, that thin layer of stagnant, sticky air right at ground level, and it physically curves them around the falling raindrops.
That's crazy.
It really is. It's an engineering marvel called scavenging avoidance.
So instead of puffing out like a loose dust cloud that the rain would easily wash away, it shoots out a self-contained pocket of air that actively dodges the water.
Precisely. And because they dodge the rain, these spores get injected high enough to catch ambient wind currents. And once they're up in the atmosphere, their unique chemistry takes over.
Right, because they're coated in mannitol. The sources mention it's a highly water-attracting sugar.
Yes, mannitol is intensely hygroscopic. High up in the clouds, these spores act as cloud condensation nuclei.
Which means they make clouds. Yeah.
Essentially, yeah. They
Yeah.
physically force water vapor to clump around them until they form large, heavy drops, which eventually triggers rainfall.
That just completely blows my mind. Like, the puffball relies on the kinetic energy of a raindrop to launch its spores, so it shoots those seeds into the sky to brew the exact weather its next generation needs to survive.
It is an astonishing ecological feedback loop. I mean, considering millions of tons of these spores launch every year, they act as massive biological rainmakers over heavily forested regions.
Okay, so this unique spore chemistry lets it manipulate water in the clouds. But what happens when that chemistry interacts with, say, human skin?
That's where the ethnobotany sources come in, yeah.
Right, because historically, Dakota tribes called the puffball Hokshi chekpa, or baby's navel, and they used it to heal newborn umbilical cords. But how is a mushroom spore acting like a bandage?
It really comes down to its severe clotting power. The spores contain compounds that rapidly accelerate blood coagulation. So what indigenous healers intuitively utilized centuries ago, modern science is now validating on a molecular level.
And they're finding even more complex chemicals inside now, aren't they? The neuropharmacology sources focus heavily on something called lycoperdic acid.
Yeah, well, researchers have isolated lycoperdic acid from the fungus. It's this unusual amino acid that closely mimics glutamic acid, which...
Which is a major neurotransmitter in the human brain, right?
Exactly. It's huge for brain function.
So how does mimicking a neurotransmitter help treat things like Alzheimer's or strokes, as the research suggests?
Well, by looking so similar to the brain's natural chemicals, lycoperdic acid can essentially trick our brain receptors. It binds to them, which could either block harmful overstimulation during a stroke or potentially encourage vital neural communication in degenerative diseases.
Just a tiny spore tricking our brain receptors? That's wild. And the sources also mention it produces a unique enzyme being eyed for green pharmaceutical manufacturing called APO.
Yeah, that enzyme can trigger complex chemical reactions using just hydrogen peroxide, which is highly sought after by the industry.
Because it's cleaner.
Way cleaner, because when hydrogen peroxide reacts, the only byproduct it leaves behind is plain water. No toxic chemical runoff, just water.
So this humble little puffball is actually like a multidimensional node. It's actively connecting the forest floor to human health, to global weather systems, to clean manufacturing.
It completely reframes how you look at the dirt under your boots.
It really does. And I want to leave you with one final detail to ponder. Because these puffball spores are so remarkably uniform in size and shape, scientists are now proposing we could use them as the ultimate eco-friendly calibration standard for atmospheric testing instruments.
Wow.
Yeah, meaning this fungus might soon completely replace expensive synthetic polystyrene plastics in those labs.
Makes you wonder how many other elegant solutions to our modern high-tech problems are just, sitting out there in the woods waiting for us to finally notice them.
Absolutely. Next time you're on a hike, remember, you aren't just stepping over a wolf's fart. You might be looking at a weather-controlling, brain-healing, smoke ring-shooting marvel of nature.